if President Putin feels that he is losing the war in Ukraine, could he resort to the unthinkable?
Yeah, I don't think he thinks it is unthinkable. I think he has the escalatory dominance, the escalatory trump card. If he starts to feel he's losing the war in Ukraine, I think he's been fairly clear in saying that he sees no problem with escalating to nuclear. So this is a war that we cannot win militarily against him, because he would escalate to nuclear, and we have no desire to escalate to nuclear. And that's why I've been arguing for de-escalation, for making a compromise. And I think that there can be a compromise. I think there could have been a compromise even before the war. And the sad part is the compromise that eventuates may be worse for Ukraine than the compromise they could have gotten before the war and avoided all this death and destruction.
So, Alan, you do a lot of work, not just on nuclear, but also on military intervention. So describe to us what the off-ramp in terms of diplomacy and a negotiated solution and resolution to Russia-Ukraine would look like.
Well, first of all, I think that Ukraine has to say that they're not going to join NATO. They're not going to be importing weapons from NATO that could threaten Russia. They will not serve as a base for missiles and other things that Russia views as a threat. And then there's going to have to be some agreement on the enclaves in the southeast that are pro-Russian, and also on Crimea, which Russia annexed in 2014. This is what, all that, I'm not to defend Putin and not to defend any of his military actions and attacks that appear to be war crimes. But the deal that he was pushing for ahead of this war was simply to implement an agreement that Ukraine had signed itself in 2015, the Minsk II agreement. And what that agreement said is that these enclaves would have autonomy within Ukraine. They would still be part of Ukraine, but they would have autonomy. And Putin, I think, felt this would ensure that Ukraine never joined NATO, that he would always have a finger in Ukrainian politics. And that was sufficient for him. And Zelensky, even though his predecessor had signed this agreement in 2015, Zelensky refused to implement it. And in my view, that's why Putin decided that he had to use military force. And then the first step he did was to recognize the independence of these enclaves so that they're no longer part of Ukraine in his view. And my guess is that Ukraine will have to accept that in any compromise peace deal. So the peace deal after this war will be worse for Ukraine than the peace deal that they signed and didn't implement prior to the war. It's really, really tragic. It's really tragic. And again, none of this excuses the military excesses and crimes that appear to be committed by Russian forces daily.